Hi all, this is the MakeHaven badging video for the pizza oven here in the MakeHaven courtyard. So if you're making pizza, your day might begin the day before when you're making the dough, and we'll have a separate video on making the dough. You can also make it the day of. And down here we have a little compartment, little ice box, so you can put your ice down in there on the bottom, put the grate on top, and then put the pizza dough boxes on top to keep them nice and cool until you're ready to make the pizzas. Take them out, let them warm up, and roll them out. And here's where all the little tools are kept. So the peels, some canvas, an axe to split bigger pieces of wood into smaller pieces of wood. Here's a little shelf that also lives in that cubby, and you can just put this here to help support your tools and whatnot. And then here is a work surface, a torch from downstairs to help light the fire. This is a blower rod to help blow some directed air exactly onto the coals where you want them. And then here's the wood supply. I've also grabbed the hardwood fire bin from the wood shop downstairs. And so you can pull from here the pieces of hardwood that don't have glue or paint or anything like that. You don't want softwoods because the softwoods produce a lot of smoke, which makes the kind of smoky residue that you see here, which we're not going for. We want a nice clean fire that doesn't produce any smoke. Over the course of a day of making pizza and other goodies, you'll start firing the oven 4 to 5 hours before you start making the pizzas. The rule of thumb is to heat the oven about an hour for every inch of thermal mass in the oven. This one has about 4 inches plus or minus, so about 4 hours. So what we don't want is to put a big fire in here that could heat the oven too quickly and damage it. So you just need to make sure to allot enough time to heating up the oven slowly with a small fire. Heating it up too fast could potentially crack the oven, so we want a smaller fire to go for a while to get it up to temperature. This is about the biggest fire that you'd want to make in here, and you can see the flames coming up, and they are licking the roof, but they're definitely not coming out the front of the oven. We have smoke coming out, so the airflow, the air is coming in the bottom and going through the fire, and then coming out the top. So you can see some wisps of smoke coming out the top, but definitely no flames. And in general, the fire can even be smaller. So Max is going to demonstrate flattening the fire in case it gets too big. You can just kind of spread it out like that. And now the fire has less oxygen, so the flames will go down. So if you accidentally put too much wood in there, that's one way to sort of drop it down a little bit. Grabbing some more wood.
With a glove.
Oh yeah, gloves are critical.
And use these tongs to kind of easily move stuff around. It's nice to have a bed of coals and then using some support wood to kind of give you a little bit more airflow.
It's an art form.
And at the beginning of the morning, you start with a pretty narrow fire. So it's pretty condensed. And then as time goes on, you build more holes. You can start to widen the breadth of your fire, and then you'll heat the hearth more evenly. So we're about 2 hours in. So at this point, we have enough coals that you can start to widen these base logs and start to heat the sides of the oven. You can see looking inside where the dome is hottest. Everywhere where it's black, it's still below 650. And if you look at the very top right now, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the top of the dome right now is starting to turn white. That means the surface of the dome is 650 or above. It definitely has not saturated deeply, so it's not an indication that it's like pizza time. But once the whole dome has become white, then you know that the surface area of your dome is 650 or much higher.
Incidentally, that's also the annealing temperature of aluminum.
And if you have your fire too far close to the front, it both will not draw air well, and you're much more likely to lose flame and heat out the front. As you can see, this is all where you've had too much flame and it's burned. So having a flame towards the back is good, or having a fire towards the back is good. That way the air draws in, pulls the flame across the whole dome, and all the heat and flame you have is contributing to heating the mass as opposed to just coming out the front lost heat. So your goal is to heat the mass, not to have a large fire.
And maybe while we're here, we can sort of summarize the constitution of the oven, just so you're aware. Its history is that it was made for Max and his wife Lorena's wedding, and it now lives here at MakeHaven. The base, this wood frame, within it is glass bottles that we collected that are resting within sand and vermiculite. And the purpose of that is just to make a nice insulative base so that the heat isn't escaping out the bottom. It keeps the bottom cool to the touch, and even the sides. And then down here is just the frame that we put it on. Going up, we have a hearth of these refractory fire bricks. And so these can sort of withstand that heat over time. And then we made a pile of sand, a dome of sand on the inside. And the purpose of that was to give the form of the inside of the oven. And then on top of that was a layer of...
the 4-inch layer of thermal mass, which is just a mixture of clay and sand and water. And then it really firings of the oven when we first built it, slowly get all the water out, so it's completely dry now. That's what absorbs the heat. You have about 4 inches of material that saturates all the way through. And then even once you've pulled the fire out, that will give you radiant heat for many, many, many hours. In the morning after you fired an oven for a long day, it's still over 100 degrees and then almost 200 degrees in the morning. So the 4-inch thickness is mostly to give you a long, even duration. So as heat comes out of the thermal mass, it will continue to seek full equilibrium and stay hot for many hours. And then outside of the thermal mass is, I think at this point, maybe 6 to 8 inches, a little uneven, so it depends, of insulation. And that's just the same material as the thermal mass, but with a bunch of straw mixed in. And the straw has two functions. It acts as a kind of natural rebar, so it makes it much more structurally sound than the thermal mass, which doesn't have just clay and sand. But more importantly, for insulation purposes, is it introduces tons and tons of little air pockets inside the outside material, and that acts as like a large insulating layer. So even when the oven is raging hot after hours and hours and hours, the outside will never really go above 225 or 250. And that heat is mostly because of cracks that have formed over time with air coming out, not the actual material. So right now, we've been firing this for 2+ hours, and even the top, which is the hottest part, it's probably 100 degrees if that on top. The book we used to build this, and to kind of learn about how it works, if you want to read more and learn more, is by Kiko Denzer, who's sort of the, I guess, the cob oven guru in North America, and I think his book is just called Oven Builders or Earth Oven Builders. I have a copy, or MakeHaven has a copy. It'll be in the library at some point if you want to learn more. And maybe someday we'll build a V2 oven that's a little bit larger and has an integrated chimney and a nicer arch and all that, and we'll use that book. It's a great resource to build more if you want to build one in your own backyard. It takes a couple hours before you want to cook much of anything, probably around noon or noon 30, so 3 hours in today. This little rack, which we are put together, kind of a ad hoc Tuscan grill. And what's nice about this is you can rake the coals to one side and have your wood on the other that's still pretty intact. This can slide right in over the coals. And then you can put cast iron, that's the best material to use to cook, on here. And basically you can then do extremely high temperature cooking of vegetables and whatever else you want to do, or sausages or sous vide meats, anything that's going to do well at super high temperatures while the oven is still continuing to heat. So we usually, you can do it for as long as you want to, but you have a solid 2-hour window where it's hot enough to do vegetables, but you want to continue to be heating the oven with the flames. You'll have that on one side and your flame on the other. And once, it's not really about the oven coming temperature on the surface, it's about how long you've saturated. So if you don't heat the oven long enough, you'll be able to make a few pizzas, but you'll notice that maybe after 5 pizzas or after 8 pizzas, the hearth is starting to cool off really quickly. You're not getting enough heat anymore, and the dome is no longer producing enough heat, and it's very difficult to recharge it at that point because you've lost quite a lot of heat. So the goal is to, especially if you're doing a lot of pizzas or a big cooking day, you want to heat it as much all the way through as you can, and then later on you need a very small amount of wood to maintain a high temperature, which is ideal for doing pizzas. So today we're going to try and do 50 pizzas, which is quite a lot. It'll probably take us about 4.5 to 5 hours of pizza cooking time, and you can't have a large fire while your pizzas are in there because the pizza's taking up a good 2/3 of it. So in order to maintain the temperature with a pretty small fire, you want to have as much saturation of the mass as possible. Something we haven't done as much of, because right now we only have this kind of nice, beautiful, but dinky door that Leroy made. Dinky, I just mean it's wood, so it can't withstand much heat. When we do use it, we soak it in water for overnight, or at least 4 or 5 hours, so it's completely waterlogged. And then would just set it over here. Once you've scraped all the coals out after doing pizzas, and it still will be 600 degrees in there. But at that point, you could bake bread at that point, for example. And if we have a nicer door, you could maintain temperature to do bread for hours in here. You could theoretically do 4 or 5 batches of bread, especially if you start with like a focaccia or something at a higher temperature and slowly come on down. Another thing you can do is later on in the evening, once it comes down further, you could use it to do lasagnas or tarts or anything in the kind of 3 to 450 range. And in the morning, you could use it as a dehydrator. It'll be between 175 and 100 for a very, very long time. It has kind of long tail that tapers, so it's actually excellent for doing. You can. We've dried out jerky in here. You can dry out apples. You can use it as a kind of energy-less dehydrator. We haven't done it, but you could also use it as a smoker for that second period of time. You could build another small fire with a few coals, and since it'll maintain temperature really evenly for a very long period of time, it's a super low fuss way to smoke. To do that, though, we would have to build a door we haven't done yet, which would allow you to still have a door on to maintain heat, but would have some airflow in and airflow out, so we could have a continuous.
So here we've got Michael tossing some onions with oil and salt. We've got some other veggies here, and they're gonna go on our homemade Tuscan grill. Got a little skillet right on top of it, and you have the fire to the side and the coals underneath, and it's right about 1:20 p.m. Here we have Max tactically assisting the coals on the left side.
That's the double Tuscan. Divided in these pieces at 350 grams each, and they're going to hang here for anywhere between half an hour and 2 hours. After that point, they'll start to degrade a little bit, but we're going to keep them in the cooler over here and use them when we're ready. Sort of a tucking and rolling. The left hand just rotates the dough. It doesn't really do much. It's all about the bench knife. We're tensioning the dough.
There it is. Moment of truth.
So we start with rice flour,
Boom.
bench flour. This is all purpose. For the peel, we use rice flour. This acts like Teflon for the dough. Nothing sticks to this. So you put a little pinch, make sure it's nice and even. Okay, now you can move on. Gather some bench flour in your area. Come over to your dough. Kind of pat your hand into the flour. Right.
It's the chosen one. Using the side.
That side is now on the bench.
All right, upside down.
I call that the top.
Wait, which side's the top?
The one that's touching the bench now.
All right.
Now I want both sides kind of floured. I don't want this to stick up.
So glad to hear it. All right, so top's back on top.
Just make sure that both sides are nicely floured.
Bottom, top's top.
Okay, now I'm going to use kind of this part of my hand to start building the crust. Now I'll use that part too when I go there. So I want to move it, just pick it up. As long as it's enough flour, it won't ever stick to the bench. Don't worry about having too much flour. You kind of want to build this nice little, half-inch crust. You don't want to be degassing into that area. Okay, so now it's kind of as big as my hand can be. Now I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to start kind of cradling it with my hands. And I'm going to let gravity do most of the work. So now I'm just only working from the outside. Just using kind of broad parts of my hands to do the stretching. And that's it. Once it's stretched kind of just like one rotation around.
What do you mean one rotation around?
One rotation around, like one circle around.
Uh-huh.
Basically how long. I didn't make it twice around.
Right. I understand.
Kind of rotating it. So now it's kind of the size that I want. I can kind of stretch it on the peel if I want. And I'm going to bring it over to my dressing station. We'll do like a simple red sauce pie. You have to exercise restraint when you make pizzas. So start with like two spoons of sauce.
For the sauce, we took a can of whole tomatoes and blended it up with some basil, salt, a little hot sauce.
Spread that all around. Make sure you get to the edge. It doesn't look like enough, but it is. Next, decide what you want to put on this thing. Do some cherry peppers. And again, like we said before, kind of like pick two toppings and kind of call it that. And some artichokes. Classic pie right here. You can break it up if you want. I like to kind of make it feel random when I put toppings on. I don't want it to look like symmetrical or geometric or anything like that. And then put some just like cut these balls in half. Again, you don't need a lot. That looks good to me.
Boom.
And then we'll throw it in the oven. Now, since we put the rice flour on here, it's going to just glide right off of it. What I want this to do, I want to shake the pie a little bit until this part catches the oven. Then I can just slowly drag it off because it'll have stuck to the hot oven. Here we go.
There it is, folks.
Bob's your uncle.
Bob is your uncle. Cue time lapse. So this is probably 90 seconds in?
I would say, yeah, that's about right. Spin.
Little spin.
Just 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Both sides of the circle. Yeah, the sweat is no good. You already turned it. Yeah, it's very hot right now. Nice.
Can you show us the bottom again, Michael? Oh yeah, there it is, folks. What are we doing here?
Michael is currently just giving the hearth a little scrub in between pies. Some of the rice flour burns, so you get that char off there.
Yep.
His hands are sweaty, so it's probably getting a little hot in his gloves. You can swap out gloves now.
Oh, wow, hot swap.
Just leave this glove kind of open like that so it dries out, because if it gets sweaty in there, then you just burn your hands.
Michael, how long would you estimate we're cooking the pizzas for?
Approximately 3 minutes, I'd say.
My hope is to do a pizza right in the middle of it.
Oh, yes.
Yes, sir.
when you're all wrapped up and you want to put the thing away for the night, you can use the little scoop here and the brush to clean out the inside of the oven into this hot ash bin where you can let it all cool. When you're all done using the pizza oven, you can box it up just like this. The wooden panel goes on the front. It just hooks onto these hooks up here, and then the padlock locks in the front, and this green tarp wraps around. This may be done more elegantly in the future, but for now that's the basic idea. All of the accessories get locked up in here, and after you've given the cooler a little time to dry out, you can close up that side too and lock it up. So happy pizza making, and thank you for watching.